Just in case you need it. Oh, it's my bank calling me. All right, we're good to go?
We are good to go.
So welcome to our first ever Canadian Film Salon here at the Vancouver Public Library. I'm the screenwriter in residence, Ken Hegan, and it's my honor to introduce you to Jason James, the director of his second feature film, Entanglement, which we're showing tonight here at the library. Jason, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, the First Weekend Club and the library have teamed up and invited me to introduce really interesting local filmmakers like yourself who are rising from strength to strength. And Entanglement is your second film, second feature I should say, as director. All right, so I wanted to ask you about your inspirations. So in planning Entanglement, tell me about your inspiration package, your personal inspiration package. What films or art were in the back of your mind when you were making Entanglement?
Yeah, I mean, when I first read the script, the first word that came to mind was vinyl. So I kind of imagined Ben as this character that's kind of, you know, he's sort of left behind a little bit, and he's a bit of a Luddite, and you know, he's kind of frayed and kind of almost disintegrating. And so in the soundtrack of the film, you hear a lot of like really old, crappy recordings of like doo-wop and pop songs from the 50s and 60s, and so that was kind of just like came out of my first reading of the script and just Ben as a character. And then as a filmmaker, you know, I really love Billy Wilder films. You know, most of my films are kind of inspired by his work. I love these kind of fun comedic concepts, but they have a bit of a darker, kind of more dramatic tone underneath. And so you think it's a comedy, but it's actually about real people and real dramatic situations. So Billy Wilder is like a really big touchstone for me as a filmmaker and stuff that I respond to. And
like The Apartment?
Yeah, The Apartment,
yeah.
Kiss Me Stupid, you know, Some Like It Hot. Like I just love all of those films. And I think for this film, you know, Michel Gondry was a big influence, and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And again, that kind of, this is the first time I've ever really done any kind of visual effects in a film, and so really wanting the visual effects to feel handmade and kind of clunky and not real. I think a lot of times, you know, when you're working with visual effects people, they're trying to do things that are photorealistic. They're trying to make things that blend into the real world and feel plausible. But in this, I wanted them to kind of bump up against reality and feel unnatural.
So instead of seamless David Fincher CGI, you want Be Kind, Rewind.
Yeah.
The things are sort of popping up in the background as if the characters made them themselves.
Yeah.
Or dreamed them themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And so you'll see these like the jellyfish or the claymation deer. Or the fireworks, and these are all kind of like, I sort of feel like there's these visuals of our collective consciousness, and like, you know, those claymation deer remind us of that Rudolph film, and you know, the fireworks kind of remind us of these like Windows 95 screensavers, and trying to tap into these things that live underneath in Ben's world that are kind of popping up to the surface.
Can you see that too? Am I just imagining that?
The first moment is when his father's in the hospital and the EKG machine starts to branch off, and it looks like his sort of wall of shame on his in his apartment.
Right.
And that's the first moment.
Maybe you can talk to me about how to open a film, or how to open a screenplay. Because in my role here at the library, I'm encouraging a lot of beginning writers to bring in their stories, basically 15 pages, and we'll see if I can make them better, make them shorter, make them faster, get them more character-driven, or at least get to the action in a clean way. And I love how you and your screenwriter, you open the film with a really with a number of symbolic images that are all about the character and where he's at, and the huge challenges ahead of him for the next 90 minutes. Do you have any advice on how to open a scene, how to open a film?
Yeah, I mean, I've made a few movies, and it's, I think every time you watch the opening of a film, you want to feel like you're in good hands. I feel like you want, and you also want to let the audience know right away what the tone is, what is the world, what are the rules of this world, because you can have anything, right? You can have a world where people walk on the ceiling, and so so I think in the first 5 minutes of the movie, you want to introduce your characters, introduce, you know, something that's going on with them, but also just I talk a lot about tone and tone in comedy, and so in the opening of this film, we see a guy who's about to commit suicide, and then he's got a hose hooked up to the tailpipe of his car, which is, he lives on the 3rd floor or something, and so he's got a lot of hoses connected, and the car's running, and so someone steals the car, and his suicide attempt is thwarted, as you say, and so it's like finding the humor in the darkness, and so you realize in the first moments of this film that's going to be okay. It's okay to laugh at that thing, and it's okay to look at the humor inside the darkness.
And you should have all your tones. If you have multiple tones, you should introduce them all as quickly as possible. Not introduce a different tone an hour into the film.
Exactly. That's why it was sort of really important to get to them. This film has a lot of magical realist elements to it, and so to get to that first magical realist element sort of fairly quickly, so that it doesn't come out of nowhere, even though you're building story and introducing characters and worlds. But so yeah, I think setting the tone and letting audiences know what the world is like, a really hard thing to do and a really important thing to do at the same time in the start of a script and the start of a movie.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about audiences want to be in the hands of a professional. They want to know that they're being taken.
You want to feel like you're well taken care of. You're like, okay, the director, the team are bringing me into this world, and I feel like I'm in good hands, and I'm going to go on an interesting, creative, fantastic, funny journey, whatever the film is. But you want to feel like you're being guided through through something.
I once got invited to pitch a film project at Banff in front of like 1,000 people, and I was nervous about it. And the best advice I got from someone the night before was like, listen, everyone wants you to do well. Mm-hmm. No one's out there hoping you fail. Audiences want to like the film.
Sure.
There's always a moment early on where we decide whether we like the show or not. Mm-hmm. And isn't it better if you can just help them get there fast?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, make that decision quickly. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about opening scenes that way? I mean, that's the opening of the film. Mm-hmm. How do you like to start your scenes? Or was there an approach that you had either in editing or at the writing stage?
That's interesting. I think, as a director, you're trying, and especially a director of indie film, you don't have a lot of time, you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of room for tons of coverage, and so, but you also need to cover the scene and all the dialogue and the characters moving, walking, talking, and so there's a lot to kind of, to cover, and so I try to leave room for one or two really interesting shots. So I try to get the normal coverage, and then I try to just get some kind of angle that's obscured or different, or and usually I've constructed how we start and how we end, but sometimes that changes. How to enter a scene. Yeah, I don't know. It just depends on what's the heart and intention of the scene. One thing that I think about a lot is how you introduce a character. So whenever when I'm we're developing a script, writing a script, even directing a film, it's like if someone's coming on stage for the first time, like how are they being introduced? Like what is interesting about that? What does it say about how you introduce them? So that's something that I think about a lot, is like how is a character first mentioned?
Can you give an example of either a film that you've made or a film that you love, mm-hmm. and how a character is introduced in a special way?
My first film, That Burning Feeling, is a romantic comedy about the least romantic thing possible. It's about a guy who gets misdiagnosed with a sexual disease, and he has to go back and tell all his previous partners. And he's kind of a cad, kind of a womanizer, and as he goes back to talk to all these women, he sort of realizes what an asshole he was, and tries to become a better person. And there's just one moment, Tyler Labine plays his just weirdo neighbor, and just the way that Tyler Labine is introduced in the film is kind of just, it always gets a huge laugh. And it's sort of like there's a woman leaving this he's got this beautiful modernist house, and Tyler's in this crack shack next door, and there's another woman leaving his house in the morning, and he's just Tyler's just he's just calling him on his shit right away, and it's just a funny, great kind of surprising moment. But yeah, it's weird to talk about. It doesn't make any sense, but you have to see the movie to
Okay.
really
Yeah.
It's just a nice introduction to a character.
And
Because they're so different. Visually,
Yeah.
you know, you have in the 235 widescreen, you see two totally different worlds in one shot.
filming comedy, is there a way that comedy, really great comedy scenes and moments should be filmed, and how should they not be filmed?
Yeah, comedy is hard, especially in Vancouver. We don't do a lot of comedy. We do a lot of sci-fi, we do a lot of cop drama. And so working with actors and working with crews when you're making a comedy is, it's like shaking them up a little bit, you know? So comedy is all about tone, you know, but what's funny about comedy is that everyone wants it to be funny. The actors, the crew members. And so it might say in the script, like, Ken walks in with a large coffee cup. And then the props person's like, what about this coffee cup? And it's a huge coffee cup, and you're like, no, let's just have the world be as honest and real, as grounded as possible, and let the characters and moments and situations be funny. Good comedy comes from truth, it comes from honesty, it comes from real moments and real situations. That's what's funny. Not an actor coming in and reading lines like it's a punchline. It's like, no, George Costanza fully believes that he should be in head-to-toe velvet tracksuit, and he's playing it dramatic, but it's so funny.
Yeah.
And that's where comedy comes from. It comes from truth, and so it doesn't come from gags or gimmicks or wackiness. To me, that's what good comedy is.
And because the local actors work in so many dramas here, I found a lot of the TV actors, they'll start with a very TV performance. Kind of whispering,
Yeah,
you know, and maybe that works, maybe that doesn't for comedy. Yeah. Do's and don'ts. Let's just say I'm making my first feature for under 100,000. Two do's that I should think about, and maybe two don'ts that I should absolutely avoid.
Do's. Be very, very prepared, over-prepared, and then throw it all away and see what happens. You know, one thing I did on this movie that I've never done, that was a big do, that I will do with on every other film, is we had one main location. It was an apartment location, and we rented a house for a month, and we were sort of dressing it and using it as a place to work out of. And because I had this location for such a long period of time, I decided to hire 2 acting students to come in and read all of the scenes that were at this location to see what the blocking would feel like, where they wanted to walk, where they wanted to go. And so the DP and I filmed these 2 acting students reading all the scenes of Ben and Tabby, or Ben and Hannah, and I could shot list based on where these performers wanted to go. And then sure enough, on the day when the real actors came in, they walked to the exact same location and walked to the exact same window. Wow. And so I knew where the dead spots were when I was getting coverage. I knew where we'd have to relight if the actor wanted to go over there. So I knew all the trouble spots and how to protect for that before going in. You know, when you're making a film, you have so little time, and blocking and rehearsals takes up 2 hours of a 12-hour day. And so if you've already done that work, you get to work with your actors even longer, and then you can find those little moments or gems that you may not have been expected. So I don't know, that was something that I will do on every movie that I can. It was saved a ton of time, and just being super prepared is a big deal.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And don'ts, maybe if you could go back in time and totally avoid a catastrophe, or at least a catastrophe in your own mind.
Yeah. Don'ts, I see a lot of young filmmakers that get really enamored with gear. And you know, you're making a short film and they're like, oh, I've got a techno crane, or I've got this big piece of equipment. And those big pieces of equipment are sexy, but they take 10 people to use, and they take 4 hours to set up, and they're really finicky. And I think when you're making indie film, the special effect is the cast, and I want to spend as much time with the cast. I want to spend as much time giving them more takes, trying different angles, trying things, and so really focusing on your actors and the talent, and that's what will, you know, make your story kind of sing or be special. It's not really, you know, the drone shot or the techno crane or, you know, or the Steadicam rig. Those things kind of slow production down, and I sort of try to move any of those special effects things to like a second unit where I don't have the actors around. And
right.
I don't know, that's like just something that I see a lot, is people getting enamored by gear, and I don't care about gear. I care about,
because you end up spending hours on your establishing shot,
yeah.
great.
Yeah,
Finish your day.
cool. And you got a nice establishment stuff. I was like, I care about performances and actors and story, and that's kind of what I want to focus on. So that's a don't.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
Anything else, if you had a time machine, that you wish you'd gone back and do something a little differently in either of your features that you directed?
Would I do something differently? I think, this sounds weird, but I think I would make it worse in a way. I think that sometimes movies and technicians do things, it's like it becomes too perfect, too pristine. And with this movie and a lot of art, I kind of want to like mess it up a bit. I want to have focus buzzes. I want things to be a little bit off kilter and have that kind of intensity and that kind of energy. And so I feel like sometimes you know, when you're making professional movies, things get too perfect. And how can you fuck it up a little bit? How to be obfuscated a little more? How can it be, you know, a little bit worse in a way, which to me makes it more real and a little more tangible and a little bit more exciting.
I'm not sure if you're talking about this scene, but the first time I outright laughed, and I smiled early on, but I outright laughed when he was leaving his therapist's office, and he gets in a little argument with the girl, and he's talking, you know, I'm not running away. Do I look like I'm running? That sort of moment. Was that improvised?
That's improvised.
I love it. I love it. That's great. It felt so cool.
Written. Yeah. So to me, those are my favorite moments in the movie. There's another scene where like Ben and Hannah are in the diner, and you know, he pushes the coffee cup and she grabs it and they kind of like spill it or whatever. There's just like they have this awkward little laugh, and that was just like the actors just like flubbing their lines and flubbing up this moment. And to me, those are the real moments. Those are the kind of like exciting, happy accidents, that improvisation and all that stuff. That's what I kind of get excited about.
Well, me too. It's kind of like, it feels like the light gets special all of a sudden in those moments.
Yeah.
Right? You know, the film shines with a real humanity that doesn't feel forced.
Yeah. So if I could do things again, it would be like to make it worse, to lean into those mistakes, to have the time and space to have more mistakes.
So does that mean letting the camera run after the scripted dialogue is done and just letting the actors riff a bit?
Yeah, that means like, having the focus not always be pristine, having more time to move the camera more so that it gets a little bit more jostled or out of focus, or you know, just pushing the material further, because you don't always have the time to do that.
Justine, any questions that you're dying to ask this man? We've got him right here.
What you doing next? What's shaking? What are you working on?
Yeah, I have 3 movies that are, you know, we're casting and financing right now. I'm doing another movie with Thomas Middleditch from Entanglement that he wrote and he's starring in.
What's it called?
It's called I'm Just the Pizza Guy. It's a horror comedy. I have another movie, one that I'm directing, called Bad Seeds, which is an all-female sperm bank heist movie. And I have another kind of thriller that I'm directing called Solitary, that's sort of, you know, a two-hander in the woods. So yeah, just like trying to find unique, interesting stories and find the right people to do them with.
Well, thank you for coming to the Canadian Film Salon and allowing us to enjoy your film. This has been Canadian Film Salon. I'm Ken Hegan, Jason James, and the First Weekend Club.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
That was fun.
Yeah, really.